This story took place about 5 years ago. During my senior year of high school, I was working on a challenging science test and got completely absorbed in it. When I finally finished, I realized that the bell had already rung and I was running late for my next class. Despite that, I decided to take my time and do my best on the test. As I left the classroom, the hallways were eerily quiet and empty. It felt strange, but I brushed it off and hurried towards my next class, hoping to avoid getting in trouble. However, just a minute later, an announcement came over the intercom, declaring a lockdown throughout the school. Feeling a sense of urgency, I quickened my pace, eager to reach my class and find safety. But as I turned a corner into another hallway, my heart skipped a beat. There, in the middle of the hallway, stood a man who clearly didn't belong. He had disheveled hair and wore worn-out, dirty clothes. Something about his appearance sent shivers down my spine. Realizing I had to pass him to get to my class, I hesitated. I couldn't risk attracting his attention, but I had no other way to reach safety. I observed him for a moment, and to my relief, he seemed to be facing another direction, unaware of my presence. With caution, I turned around and silently sprinted back, seeking refuge around the corner. I held my breath, hoping he hadn't noticed me. But suddenly, his voice pierced the silence. He yelled out, "Hey, I know you're right around the corner." The sound of his voice sent panic coursing through my veins. How could he know I hadn't made a sound? I didn't waste a second. I bolted in the opposite direction, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear his footsteps closing in, and fear gripped me. Desperately, I scanned the hallways for any sign of help, but there was no one in sight. I continued running, turning corners as fast as I could, praying for someone to appear. But it seemed like the man was gaining on me. He was faster, and my legs were growing tired. The school felt hauntingly empty, and I wondered if I was the only one left. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, defenseless against this mysterious pursuer. In a desperate attempt to escape, I made a decision. I headed towards the west entrance of the school, where I spotted a police officer. With every ounce of strength left in me, I sprinted towards the officer, hoping he would intervene. As he caught sight of the man chasing me, he reacted swiftly, taking off after him. The man abruptly changed direction, fleeing from the police in another desperate bid to escape. I stayed by the door, catching my breath, as the man was eventually apprehended several minutes later. The lockdown ended shortly thereafter, and I was left bewildered, not knowing who the man was or what his intentions were. The incident remained a haunting memory, the scariest moment of my life. To this day, I still wonder about that mysterious intruder and why he targeted me during the lockdown. It serves as a reminder of the importance of safety and vigilance, even in the seemingly familiar confines of a high school. This story happened when I had to go to Saturday school, which was a form of detention at my high school. It was during my junior year, and I ended up in Saturday school because I had forgotten to return several of my school books. We were given books from the library for specific classes, and it was our responsibility to return them by the end of the semester. Unfortunately, I had lost one of the books in my house, but eventually found it and returned all the overdue books. Despite returning them, I still had to attend Saturday school as a consequence. Saturday school was held from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., but each student had different hours to serve. In my case, I only had to be there for 2 hours, so I would be able to leave by 10 a.m. The atmosphere in Saturday school was similar to a study hall. It took place in one of the language arts classrooms, and our teacher, Mr. Sanders, supervised us while sitting at his desk. He made sure we behaved, and occasionally provided assistance with questions or problems if he could. On that particular Saturday, my mom dropped me off at the school just before 8 a.m. I entered the classroom and joined 4 other students, 2 of whom I recognized, while the other 2 were from different grades. The familiar faces belonged to students who were known troublemakers, often skipping classes or failing to turn in assignments. As a usually well-behaved student, I felt slightly out of place among them. Mr. Sanders started the morning by speaking to us briefly, before sitting at his desk and working on his computer. I began writing the short paper assigned to me, reflecting on what I had learned from not returning my books on time. It didn't take long to complete, and afterward, I focused on finishing some other homework I had brought with me. By 9:30 a.m., I had completed my tasks and decided to grab a book from Mr. Sanders' bookshelf to pass the time. Shortly after I started reading, Mr. Sanders announced that he was going to the bathroom, and jokingly asked if we would be okay in his absence. He left the classroom, and a minute later, one of the other students got up and left as well. I didn't think much of it at the time and continued reading. However, a few minutes later, the school's intercom unexpectedly declared a lockdown. We were confused as to why we would go into a lockdown on a Saturday when hardly anyone was present in the school. Being familiar with lockdown drills, we knew that during a lockdown, classroom doors were supposed to be closed, locked, and the lights turned off. We were then to sit on the ground in the back of the classroom. However, our teacher was nowhere to be found. After a brief discussion among ourselves, we decided to close and lock the classroom door. We turned off the lights and settled into the back of the room, trying to make sense of the situation. Time passed, and nothing eventful occurred until someone attempted to open our classroom door. Thinking it might be our teacher, I walked over to check, but no one was there. I returned to my seat, and shortly after, we heard shouting in the distance. Once again, someone tried to open our door, and when I looked through the small window, it was the same student who had left earlier. He was yelling and asking to be let in. However, just as I was about to open the door, I heard someone down the hallway say, "Police." The student ran away, and moments later, the police knocked on our door. We allowed the police officers into the classroom, and they explained the situation. When Mr. Sanders went to use the bathroom, the student who had left earlier followed him and unexpectedly attacked him from behind, knocking him unconscious. A janitor heard the commotion, causing the student to flee, and triggering the school-wide lockdown and police response. Although Mr. Sanders sustained a minor concussion, he eventually recovered. I wasn't sure what the student's issue with Mr. Sanders was, but I had heard rumors that he had been suspended earlier in the year for fighting. That incident marked the only time I had to attend Saturday school, and it turned out to be a rather eventful day. I was relieved that I didn't let the troubled student back into the classroom, considering the situation that unfolded. Saturday school, which initially seemed like a simple consequence, took an unexpected turn due to an unfortunate incident involving my teacher. Back when I was in 10th grade, I attended an average high school where not much excitement occurred on a daily basis. I would ride the bus to and from school, which was only a 10-minute journey from my house. One spring day, during my third period writing class, I found myself growing increasingly bored, as usual. With about 20 minutes left in class, I asked for permission to use the bathroom. My teacher granted me permission, and I left the classroom. As I walked down the empty hallway towards the bathrooms, which were located at the end of the hall and around a corner, something unusual happened. While I was inside one of the stalls, I heard the bathroom door open. However, instead of someone entering, I heard a voice ask, "Is anybody in here?" I was perplexed by the question, since there were multiple stalls in the bathroom. I didn't respond, and after a few seconds, the door closed, indicating that whoever it was had left. I assumed it might have been a teacher, and didn't think much of it. As I stood at the sink, washing my hands, I suddenly heard the school intercom beep, followed by an announcement declaring that the school was now on lockdown. The announcement stressed that it was not a drill. A sense of unease washed over me upon hearing those words. Perhaps that's why someone had asked if anybody was in the bathroom. Uncertain of what to do, I debated whether I should stay in the bathroom or return to my classroom. It seemed best to go back to my class, considering my teacher was probably wondering where I had gone. However, I didn't want to be spotted by any teachers in the hallway, fearing I might get into trouble. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed it was completely empty and eerily silent. I hurriedly made my way back down the corridor, intending to go around the corner and return to the hall where my classroom was located. But as I approached, I heard footsteps growing closer. Initially assuming it was a teacher, I decided to step back, hoping to go unnoticed. To my surprise, the footsteps continued to approach, growing faster. Realizing that the situation might be more than just a teacher, I quickened my pace, and so did the mysterious footsteps behind me. Panic surged through me as I desperately searched for an escape route. Spotting an open door, I hastily entered, shutting it behind me. The room was pitch black, making it difficult to see, but I could make out the presence of extra desks and boxes. I remained completely silent, even holding my breath, as I strained to hear the footsteps nearing the room. They arrived right outside, but thankfully, they passed by without hesitation. Relief flooded over me, as I heard the footsteps fade away down the hall, growing quieter with each step. The building fell into a profound silence, and I began to feel more at ease, believing the person who had been following me had finally left. To be certain, I waited a little longer before deciding it was safe to leave. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a noise emanated from behind me, within the confines of the room. I turned around just in time to glimpse a man emerging from behind one of the boxes. The darkness obscured any identifying details, but it was clear that it was a man. Fear propelled me toward the door, as I sprinted as fast as my legs could carry me. Luckily, I was only a few feet away, and I burst out into the hallway without looking back. Running in the direction from which the footsteps had come, it didn't take long before I spotted one of our teachers walking in confusion. It was a teacher I recognized, so I immediately informed him about the man hiding in the closet. Together, we made our way to the front of the school, where the main offices were located. Upon arrival, we were ushered into a room where I discovered that the police had just arrived. Within a remarkably short time, they apprehended the man who had moved and was now hiding in one of the bathrooms. It turned out that he had no business being in the school, which explained the lockdown. The footsteps I had heard were merely those of a teacher, innocently navigating the building. Looking back, I couldn't believe I had taken refuge in the same room as the intruder. In retrospect, I should have calmly returned to my classroom instead of panicking and hiding.